Hi guys, today we have my JVC CX-5K portable cassette player. This is from the 80s, it's 1986, maybe 1987. This was my favourite cassette player at the time. I grew up in the 80s and had a number of portable cassette players, but the CX-5K was my favourite. I've owned 3 of these in the past. One of them broke, one of the early ones, then I had another one which I sold, and then this one I've got recently from eBay, and it is in remarkable condition. There is no physical damage on here. There is a little bit of scuffing on the corner here on the chrome. This is just plastic, it's chromed plastic, and it rubs off on the corner, but that is the only area that has any damage. The machine is in very good condition. I'll just show you inside. I'm sure if you're here then you know about these machines already, but it was one of the smallest in the world when it came out. Retailed at £79.95, that's English pounds. But looking inside here, I mean, this is it's really clean. I haven't done any cleaning on here. This is as it came. Battery compartment lid. These aren't always intact. These go missing. Single AA battery, 1.5 volts. And the clever thing about this particular machine is that when the tape is out of the machine, it actually closes down to a smaller size. So when the tape is in the machine, this is the position that the case is in. When the tape is out of the machine, it goes from this position to that position. So it actually shuts down a bit more. And this is barely bigger than an empty cassette box. This is it's really tiny, and it's packed full of features as well. It's got metal chrome tape position. It has Dolby V noise reduction. It's got auto reverse settings, and it's also got soft touch controls on the front there. Now this machine does work, however this video is going to be a strip down because the playback, the wow and flutter, is all over the place. It speeds up, it slows down, and I am expecting that the belt, the rubber belt in this machine is bad and will need replacing. Now I haven't actually got the belt yet. What I'm going to intend to do on this video is take it apart, make sure I can get it apart, and if I can get to the belt I will then order a belt, and I'll continue the video with the fitting of that belt. But this is the soft touch controls on the front. So if I press this, you'll be able to hear the motor, and you press it again and it goes into reverse and stop. I'll just show you inside before we take it apart in case we can't get it back together. So if I press play, you'll see the playhead rise up, and then reverse and stop. It really is remarkable what they could get into that size in 1986. So I've had a look at this, perhaps how I can get into it. There's no access underneath. So the underneath, I think the machine starts off with an empty shell and everything else goes back into it. I couldn't find any information online about this. I couldn't see any other videos, so I'm hoping that this video will help out somebody who wants to perhaps strip down one of these again, see my errors perhaps in taking it apart. But from what I can see, so we've got the 2 capstans here. These are the main drive capstans, so there'll be a motor somewhere, perhaps this semicircle there, if you can see it, perhaps this. Let me get a screwdriver. So I'm thinking perhaps this here is the main drive motor, and there'll be some sort of rubber belt around this capstan wheel and this one. So I'm hoping we can just take off this metal plate. I can see some screws in there, 4 screws, and if I take those out, I'm hoping this plate will come off and might give us a little bit of access. So let's do that. The only tools I've got today are 2 small screwdrivers. I'm hoping this is all we require. So start off by removing those screws. I've slightly magnetised this screwdriver just because the screws are really small. Didn't want them dropping onto the carpet and losing them. So I'm just going to put these to one side as I take them out. Can't really get the right angle on these screws and I don't want to round them off, so I think I'm going to look at taking this plastic lid off. There's a screw here on the side, 3 on the front, 1 on the other side. I think if I take those out, we may be able to take this lid off and I'll be able to get the right angle on this screwdriver. Like I said, it's the very tiny screws, it wouldn't take much to damage those. So I think I will try that. Bet there's people screaming at the video saying I'm doing it the incorrect way, but like I said, I've got no information on this. Probably should have bought a service manual for it, but it will be okay. Okay, so that's the 5 screws out of the lid. Let's see if it'll come off. Oh, I can see there's 2 more. There's 1 there and 1 on this side. Okay, just be careful of this stainless steel spring here. This is just to keep the tape in a taut position in the machine, but that is fixed in under this this plastic. This has been put on afterwards, so I don't think this can come out. So just be careful. The There's also the switch there, the auto reverse switch. So this will need to come away from the switch. And there we are. Okay, good. Let's put this to one side. Okay, so we can get a better look at the front of this now. You can see that there's a full edge circuit board there that runs around, so the switch is on the front here. There was a model of this which had a built-in FM radio here, and that was called the CX-5K. But this is just the, I think it was the same size. I don't think it was any bigger, but it had a little tuner on the front. Okay, so we can get a better look inside this now. There's the small motor that drives the drives this mechanism. I'll just take the battery out before we continue. Okay, so we can get to these screws a lot easier now. Okay. Yeah, it does look like the motor, this disc here, but we need to go a bit deeper, I think. Can't see any screws in this circuit board. Battery terminals are on this though, so they might need disconnecting. Oh, it does just lift out. Some wires on here somewhere on the right hand side. Okay, there's 3 wires. This, oh, actually there's more than that. This must be the power board. Oh, one thing to watch out for, there is a plastic arm here which engages with a little slide switch. You can see that little slide switch there. So when we put this back together, just need to make sure that that switch is engaged in the center of that this plastic arm. Now we can see our belt now. Motor isn't where I thought it was, so this is the motor here, and we can see the rubber belt running around this gold coloured capstan wheel here. It's about that big. This center disc must be just the drive for the spindles. There's a second capstan wheel here, but I can't see a belt on that one. Oh, there is. There is a rubber belt on that wheel as well. So it looks as though this plate this whole plate here needs to come off, and the bracket for the front assembly is on top of that bracket, so it looks as though I need to take out this bracket here, which will hopefully disengage this top portion. I might be able to take it away, hopefully, and then we can go a bit further in, perhaps take this plate off. That should give us access to the belt. With things like this, I'm always worried that when we take off a plate with the little cogs and bits and pieces, that everything will spring out and I'll never get it back together. But this belt does need replacing, so I can't see another way of doing that. I'm wondering if the belt could be slid underneath, but it'd be very difficult to get it around the back of that wheel. I think we'll go a little bit further. We'll try and get this this assembly off the top. I'm just going to pop this back for the moment, just so I don't damage those wires. So it looks as though there's a screw here for this bracket, and also there's one just inside there. So take off these two, see if that comes off. These are really tiny screws. Get the size of that. Oh, that is loose now. Looks like there's then one more screw on the other side on that bracket. Oh, that's interesting. The screw on this side, screw on the right hand side of that bracket, is smaller than the one on the other side, so just a little tip there, make sure you mark which one's which. I'll just bring the other one back in. You probably can't see that on the camera, but this one, the one on the right hand side, is about half the length of the one on the left hand side, so just be aware of that. Now, let's see if we can get this off. Obviously the circuit board is attached, so it's not going to come all the way off, but as long as we can move it out of the way. Looks loose, this bracket. It looks as though it'll just come off, I think. Maybe not. Leave it there for now. Now this side looks as though there's a peg here which is pivoting on there, so I'm wondering whether this whole unit needs to slide this way away from that peg in order to get it out. It's free on this side now. Don't want to force it too much. has lifted up, but you can see this side, on the left hand side, it's totally disengaged. But the right hand side, it's still stuck. It looks as though it's on that, looks as though it's on this peg here. Looks as though this is attached. Let's see if I can move it out of the way. No, I don't want to force it too much. I'm worried about damaging this ribbon cable. As you can see, there's all sorts of fine circuitry there. If I pull that back too much, it might damage that. I'll leave it there, see if we can get to it from here. Okay, it looks as though on this plate here we have 1, 2 screws. Can't see any others. Let's take those out. Hinge on the side, it has like a little ball bearing that locates to stop it moving up too much, so we need to keep just moving that out of the way. As soon as it comes down too far, it locks back into position. Well, this plate is still pretty solid by the feel of it. Oh, lift it up a little bit. The hinge from the left hand side's just dropped out, so we'll need to put that back in when we reassemble. I'm still thinking this black plate must lift up somehow. It looks like there's screws here, but from underneath. I'm thinking now that we may have to take out this whole mechanism. This is sat in this bottom shell. See one screw here. I can't see any other screws. There's one on the back. It comes through here. So if we take that one out, and this one, let's see if that gets us anywhere. Okay. Right, let's see if this is any looser. Oh yeah, you can see it. It's going to come out, but it's concerned everything's going to spring out. Let's have a look. I'm just going to pause for a moment. I need to have a good look at this. There is screws attaching it together, but we can't get to that from underneath. So there must be something I'm missing on top here. Also, the headphone jack and these sockets, these switches are on this side of the board, so this whole mechanism needs to come up from the right-hand side and then slide this way in order to disengage these parts. So it does need to lift up on this side. Let me have a look, and I will I'll come back in a second. Yeah, there wasn't any extra screws, so the screws that you've all seen come out so far, no more screws. It did just lever up, it's just tight, so the whole mechanism, mechanism and the board underneath on this plastic frame, this all just lifts up from the right hand side, and you can see it's tight against the plastic here, so that's why it was tight to come out. Once that's released from this side, this whole section just comes away now. As I said, the headphone jack and the switches over here, this whole thing needs to slide to the right like that, and then it can come away. So I'm expecting under here to see some more screws. So we can see two screws under here. I think that is holding that plate on from underneath, so we'll just take those off. Okay, this is all moving away now. Just it's got sticky tape on here holding the ribbon on. Whoops, little switch tops. Just got away there. Get that in a second. Let's just see if we can get this away. I think this bit of circuit board here just needs prising up away from the plate. There's more bits of circuitry there that are that are taped on. You know what though, I think that gives us enough room. If you look underneath, it's it's really fiddly, but you can see access to the belts on that side. Okay, what I'm going to do, I will order these belts and we will continue the video at that point, and we'll see if putting it together is as easy as it was taking it apart. So I will continue the video shortly. Okay, so we're back with the JVC cassette player. It's been a good few weeks since the last video was made on this. I've been struggling trying to get hold of a replacement belt. I couldn't find an exact one anywhere online. I found the original JVC part reference for the belt, but they've stopped making it, and nobody seems to have a substitute on their catalogues for it. So I gave the measurements to a belt manufacturer, ANT&TECH, and they've sent me this one to try. It's labelled up CX-5K, but we're not sure whether it's going to fit at the moment. It should do. It's the same specification, same belt, 0.7mm square cut belt. So what I'm going to do is we'll try and fit this. If it works, great. I can get back in touch with ANT&TECH and they can add this to their known belts for the cassette players. So yeah, let's get on with that now. So now I've not taken everything off this. The wires are still attached to the circuit board here at this position. So you see the way they're coming around here. They're sort of tight against that board. And this is a flexible PCB, so you do need to be careful. It depends how much you're going to strip this down. I've stripped down the minimum I need to in order to get access to the belt. If you wanted to get more, if you wanted to take the mechanism out to service it, put some oil in there, or the motor replacement, then you would take more apart. But I've sort of left as much as I can together, and that's why it's not opening as flat as it could do. If that cable was taken off there at that point, then this could open up flat. So just something to be aware of. So with regards to the belt, it comes around the two capstan rollers. So it comes around here, comes past, actually, I must have knocked it off, it actually should be on there. So this center roller here, this black one, this drives the cassette spindles itself. But the two capstan rollers here, the belt snakes around here, comes around the motor, back around the spindle reel, and then back around the other capstan reel. So that's the position that it takes. So to get this out, we need to remove this little plastic bracket here. Apologies for this light flickering. One of my lights is on the blink. Yeah, so this plastic bracket here just lifts up out of the way. This is just stopping you lifting this metal section up. You might be able to see that just lifting up there, and the belt needs to come from underneath that. So you need to take the plastic bracket away and then lift this up, and the belt comes out from underneath. So what I'm going to do first, I'm just going to unhook it off the motor. So if we turn this over, you can see it's around the motor here. I'm just going to turn this light off. It's a little bit darker now, but hopefully you can still see. So unhook the belt from the motor, and then back on the other side. All this belt is loose now, so we should just be able to take that out. Like I said, it needs to come under this silver catch here. This needs to be lifted up, and the belt just comes from underneath. And that's it. So let's compare it to the one that was sent to us. Try and get it in the same shape. Looks a little bit smaller, but I expect that because the old belt will have stretched, which is of course why it's slipping. Yeah, I mean it's difficult to say for sure, but let's get it in the machine and see how it looks. Certainly the diameter of the belt looks to be the same. So I think the easiest way is to put it under this metal catch first. Like so. and then we'll put it around the two rollers. In fact, I'll just put that underneath there. I'll get it hooked on the motor first, because I think that's going to be the... Oh no, maybe not. Okay, I'll do it from this side first, and then I'll go around the other side for the motor. So there's the belt. I'm just going to bring it across onto the motor. Like so. Right, let's have a look. I think that's all right. It's got good tension. And if we turn one of these, the other one's turning, and the centre spindle one is turning. I think that looks okay. Just turn it around a little bit just to make sure it's flat. Yep. I think that is good. And as long as I haven't damaged anything in the process, it is fairly fragile, all this, the little wires and the flexible circuit board. It is a little bit fragile, so you do need to be careful. Okay, so need to start putting this back together now. First thing to put in is this plastic frame, which sits there, and then this board needs to come back down onto the mechanism. And just have a little check before you do this, make sure nothing's broken, there's no wires hanging off. So you've moved this a little bit, it is fragile, something could have broken off. So this just needs to fold back in place. Oops. The little cage doesn't want to stay put. Okay, so all I've done is I've just folded this back down and put in the two screws. So there's one there and one there, which hold it in place. What I've also done is here, this circuit board. I wasn't originally, when I put it back together, these wires. There's a blue one, and then there's a black and red for the motor. These were on top of this circuit board, and I figured out that it lies down flat if they're underneath. So I just put a little bit of tape on there, a little bit of sticky tape, and just to hold this in place, because of course when it goes back into the shell, we don't want this moving around and those wires popping out. So that all looks fairly flat now. And if you look at the side, it's flat with the plastic frame. And the other side. So that all looks good. Okay, one little thing I've just noticed that I'll have to sort out is that the buttons, these plastic slider switches, these have fallen off once that frame had been unscrewed from the bottom plate, because if you can see that there's a slot cut out into it, and that's actually got to hook into that plastic. So we need to separate the plastic frame from the base, and this then hooks inside onto that plastic frame. and engages with the switch that's in there. So what I'm going to need to do is just undo this screw, carefully open up this a little bit and just slide these plastic switches back in. So if these are fallen out on yours, they need to be put back in before this is screwed in place. So let's do that now. Okay, so you see that has allowed that to move away. So you need to hook this underneath that frame, but also there's a little cutout on the back, and that engages with the white switch that's in there. So this is going to be a little bit tricky. Okay, that's one in. Now there's two of these. Let's get the other one. It's the same deal. Yeah. Tricky because you've got to hold the switches in place and try and get the screw in. Okay, that's one in. So before I put the other one in, I'm just going to check that these switches actually are in the right place. This one's working, but this one I don't think is engaged properly. Yes, it is. Okay. Okay, so those switches are back in place now and it's screwed together. Just make sure that before you go any further that the switches do actually operate the switch and that the little slot that's in that plastic is engaged. Just try those switches first. These are fine. So the next thing to do, this needs to go back into the bottom shell. So just make sure that this side where the headphone socket is and the switches and the volume control, make sure that these engage in their respective holes in the case before this side will drop in. So it needs to go in sort of at an angle like this. But, there's not a lot of room, so it's going to be a little bit fiddly. Sorry, that was off camera there a little bit, but what had happened was I had to take this out. Just another thing to be aware of. This material here, this little black gauze there, that has got trapped inside, so this circuit was literally on top of it, and that was enough to stop it getting into the shell. So all I did was take this out again, make sure that this cloth here was on the outside, and then it dropped in a lot easier that time. Okay, now's a good time to put this piece back in. This is the plastic actuator, which when the auto reverse hits in, this slides along, it moves this, and there's a switch on the underside of this circuit board. So before this circuit board goes back down, just remember to put this piece back in. So there's a little tube just under here, and that's got to locate in the center of this. So I'm just going to move this up slightly. This should slide right in. That's it. You can see that moves back and forth. So when this goes back together, the jaws in the end of this need to engage with this piece of metal here. And when we put the circuit board down, we need to make sure that the switch on the underside of this, see if I can show you, it's this switch here, it's a slider switch. That plastic in the center needs to be lined up in the center of that. So I think we can put this back down now. Like I said, we've just got to make sure that that is lined up with the switch. Can't really show you there, it's too small, but you just need to make sure that that's in line with that plastic. So what you can do at this point is just move the end and make sure that you can feel that switch moving. Which I can. Okay, so with that down, we can put this plate back in place. 4 screws on this plate. By the way, my screws are just organised in a little box here. I've just got like a little compartment box, and I always just write on the other side my own notes where they're coming from, serial number plate, plastic frame, whatever. I detected at least 7 different types of screws in this cassette player, and they're all tiny, so you do need to be careful that you can identify them. The ones for this black and white plate that we're putting on now, they're actually all the same size, those 4. Again, magnetic screwdriver, it's always handy. For picking up small screws like this. Okay, it's starting to feel like it's a bit more together now. Good idea at this point just to make sure that the mechanism's still free. See that centre disc there turning round when I move a capstan wheel. You can see the other capstan wheel moving as well. So that all looks good. Okay, so the next part is to get this seated back into the brackets. So this is the bracket for the left hand side. This gets screwed in last. The one on the right hand side, if you remember, needs to locate onto this pin here. This has a hole in it there and that locates on this pin. So see the hole there. Okay, so that's located into there. And then we need to, just remembered the plastic inside that plastic switch, that slider. I don't know if you can see, but this is the metal there that needs to engage in that plastic slider that's just underneath. So let's make sure it's in the right position. So once you're happy that's fully engaged in the right hand side, you can go ahead and refit the bracket on the left hand side. So again, you've got this little pin here which engages in that hole, and then the rest of the bracket screws down inside the player. So you need to just place that inside first and then put the pin in there. Like so. And then there's two screws on that bracket. There's one here on the outside and one inside there. So I'll go ahead and put those in. These are actually the smallest screws in the unit, the ones for the hinge. Really tiny. So there's 3 screws for that hinge. There's a small silver one on the side, just there. There's the black one that's inside on that bracket. And there is another silver one on the other end there. So with those 3 in, the hinge now is back to normal. Now would be a good time to test this out, I guess. Before we put too much more on it, so we can drop a battery in. Tape. Okay, forward and reverse play is working. Now before with the old belt, the fast forward and rewind didn't work. The tape was too much weight for it to move around. It was slipping. So here's the first test of that belt. Yeah, that's good. Looks like that belt is fine. Okay, that's good news. Relieved about that. I didn't want to open it back up again. So we will continue with the rebuild. Right, next thing to do here is to put the lid back on. Okay, there's just a couple of things to be aware of with this lid before it's refitted. The first one is just to make sure all the buttons are correctly seated. They're held in place by a small metal finger there. It's just a sprung bit of steel, and it's just putting a little bit of pressure on the plastic switches, but if you press them on this side they literally will just drop out, and they just need to be refitted under that metal lever. So they're not glued in or anything. The next thing is the auto reverse switch on the end. Now this switch is fitted from the outside, so what I think I will do is just take that switch out, just on clips, just presses out. I'll take that out, and then once the lid is assembled we'll be able to see the position of the switch underneath, and then we can just snap that cover back down on top. I think that's the easiest way of doing it. Oh, so after what I was just saying, I've just lost a button. Let me just put that back. That's it. Okay. And the last thing to be aware of is this the spring here, the stainless steel spring. So when we fit the lid back on, that spring needs to be lifted over this side, like that. So let's see if we can do that now. So first of all, we'll bring this spring over, like so, and then this should just cover this side. Okay, so that chrome edge is actually going behind the black plastic. As I'm putting this on, I'm looking to see whether those screw holes can be seen. Maybe it's easier just to close this up. Yeah, I think those screw holes are visible now, so let me just get a screw ready. I'm not tightening these up yet, I'm just putting them in place, just make sure they all engage correctly, and then I can tighten them up. Not that they need to be very tight. Okay, so it's the 3 in the front, and then there's one on the side. So the ones on the side are black. Okay, so it's just the last 2 screws in the case lid. There is one there and one there. Okay, I think that's it. Right, let's give it a test. See if it's still working. Oh, it's running perfectly now. The was just the belt that was required. So I'm not going to say it was an easy job to do, but then again, I'm no expert with these. It's the first one I've done, so I would say that any confident hobbyist could do this if they've opened similar things before. You just got to be careful. I'm not saying I did it exactly the right way or as per the manual. I don't have a service manual, so I don't know the correct way, but if you follow my instructions to change the belt, you should be able to do it, because this is all back together fine. Okay, well, if this has been helpful for you, if you've enjoyed the video, give it a like for me, and if you want to see similar videos like this, you can subscribe to my channel. So thanks very much. Just one thing I forgot about, the auto reverse switch, just for completeness, we'll put that back on. Don't think it matters which way up it goes. So there's a cutout in the plastic, and that needs to engage with the white button inside there. I think it just presses in. Yep, that was it. Okay, just wanted to complete it with that bit.